Self-growth changes relationships. One of the things that nobody really tells you about personal growth is that it can change your relationships. And I don't mean romantic relationships only. I mean friendships, family ships, work relationships, even relationships with people you have known most of your life. Because when you change, the way people relate to you changes too. And sometimes that can be one of the most difficult part of growth. Hello, I'm Sahar Huneidi Palmer. I'm a life mentor, intuitive life mentor, author, and the creator of the Real You methodology that depends, or the dynamic of which is the BEMA methodology. I have been working with people for more than 30 years, and I have seen what happens repeatedly. Someone begins to understand themselves more deeply, they become more aware of how they feel, what they need, what they believe in, and what they are no longer willing to accept or put up with. And then something unexpected happens. Their relationships begin to shift. Sometimes the shift is gentle, sometimes it's uncomfortable, and other times it can be really painful because the people around you may not understand why you're changing. You may even feel, okay, my cat is passing by. You may even feel that your growth is somehow a form of rejection. But often enough, what is happening is far more complex. You're no longer participating in the same relationship in exactly the same way. Perhaps you used to say yes when you really wanted to say no. Perhaps you kept quiet because you wanted to avoid conflict. Perhaps you were always the person who listened, helped, rescued, organized, accommodated others, everyone else's needs. And perhaps you were the one who kept the peace. And then, as you become more self-aware, you begin to notice what those roles have been costing you. You begin to ask yourself questions you may never have asked yourself before. Why do I always agree? Why do I always feel guilty about saying no? Why do I have certain conversations and they leave me exhausted? Why am I afraid of disappointing this person or the other? Why do I become a different version of myself around X, Y, and Z? These are important questions because growth is not only about what you learn. It is also about what you begin to see, what you become more aware of. And once you see something clearly, it becomes very difficult to unsee it. I think this is where many people misunderstand personal growth. They imagine that becoming more self-aware will simply make life easier. They imagine that clarity will solve everything. But clarity can also disrupt things just as well. Because clarity shows you where you are aligned and where you are not. It shows you where you're being yourself and where you are performing a role. It shows you when relationships allow you to breathe and when they suffocate you. They show you when you have to adjust or edit yourself constantly in order not to be rejected by someone else. And that can be really uncomfortable. I have experienced this in my own life. There have been times when I have changed and the relationship around me changed as a result. Not necessarily because somebody was wrong and not because I suddenly became a better person, not at all. I simply was not the same person I had been before. My understanding has changed. My priorities have changed. My awareness has changed. And I could no longer pretend that something has not shifted. I could no longer act in that way. This is something that I have learned over many years. Relationships often develop around the unspoken understanding of who we are supposed to be. Nobody sits down and writes the rules, but the rules are there. And you are the strong one, for example, and you are the easy one, and you are the responsible one, and you are the one that should never complain, and you are the one who always, whom they always call first. You are the one who forgives first. You are the one who should tolerate and understand. You are the one who's always reliable, and that's why they come to you. You are the one who keeps everybody together. And when they begin to step outside that role, the whole relationship can feel unsettled. Your values may have changed, not necessarily because the other person is bad or controlling, but what you need, what you focus on, what your life requires is very different. They know how to relate to the version that they're used to, that they've always known, but now that you're changing, they don't know how to connect with you. This is why I think growth requires compassion as well as courage, because it is very easy to turn personal growth into judgment. I remember I had a client who came in to see me once, and she said, I am more spiritual than my husband is. And I said, what does that mean? He doesn't have to go to yoga lessons or do or go on retreats. That is a judgment. That doesn't mean you're more aware or more spiritual. I don't believe that life is so simple. Life is as complex as human beings are, because people are complex, relationships are complex, and history matters, and love matters, and loyalty matters, and timing matters. And sometimes a relationship needs to end, whether a work relationship or a romantic relationship, and of course it does. And sometimes it needs simply, we need to change in order to adjust in that relationship. That is a very different thing, because perhaps you need to speak more honestly. Perhaps you need to speak more diplomatically. I'm working on that. And perhaps you need to allow the other person to be disappointed without threatening, immediately abandoning yourself or threatening the relationship or taking it personally. Perhaps you need to stop expecting the other person to meet your needs or for them to stay as you once knew them. This is unfair. We all change. Perhaps you simply need to recognize that this relationship can no longer remain in your life. It really is a whole spectrum. Nothing should be rushed into. But growth is about observing and being honest, or having honest communication first with yourself before you're able to have it with the other. When we talk about the BEMA methodology, it's body, emotions, mind, and accountability to action. We are multidimensional, and we need to think of these dimensions and find out where we are out of alignment and where we are holding ourselves back, in what dimension. You may have noticed your body feeling tense when you met someone. You may find yourself holding your breath, or becoming restless, or feeling physically drained. I am not saying that every physical sensation means a relationship is wrong. Of course not. But your body is part of your awareness, and it is picking up on signals, and you need to just let them rest and find out what they mean for you. Then, of course, there are emotions. How do you actually feel within this relationship? Do you feel free to be yourself? Very often clients are very worried about what the other person thinks of them, but I have a rule. I never go into somebody else's mind. I observe myself. Am I comfortable, anxious, guilty? Am I myself? You're not responsible for the happiness of the other person. And sometimes you may feel resentment, but is never able to express it. A lot of things get held within the body. The purpose is to become aware. Then, when you are aware, you need to work on your belief system. And this is where things really become interesting, because many of us carry beliefs about relationships that we have not consciously examined. He should treat me that way, or she should act in that way. Why? A good daughter should always be available, for example. A loyal friend should never say no. They should always be there for me. If someone loves me, I should not disappoint them, and so on. If a relationship changes, you could feel that you have failed, but you haven't failed. The entity of that is the relationship has changed, because you've changed, they've changed. If someone upset you, then you think, oh, I must have done something wrong. Where do these beliefs come from? Are they actually yours, or are they acquired and you're not even aware of that? Have you simply been living according to these beliefs, but you've never actually examined them? You need to hold yourself accountable, because that is self-empowering. Awareness without action doesn't change anything. Everything will stay the same. You can now understand that you need to speak honestly and still avoid the conversation. You can recognize that you keep abandoning your own needs and then continue doing it because the alternative feels uncomfortable. So that is when you're aware, but you don't act differently. This is why accountability matters. At some point, your actions have to reflect what you know of yourself, of your life, of your needs right now. Who are you becoming? And I think this is where real growth begins, by being true to yourself. Not when you read other books or attend retreats or webinars, not when you understand other people's concept, but when you begin to have a different conversation with yourself. When your awareness changes things for the better, makes you happier, more enjoying your life more, and yes, when people react differently. Someone who was used to you as being constantly available without boundaries, it might shock them, but that is not your fault. Don't take it personally. But this doesn't automatically mean that they're a bad person, and it doesn't automatically mean that you are wrong either. It simply means the relationship is being asked, if you like, to adjust. You need to adjust the dynamic, the expectation. And I'm a true believer in communication instead of expectation. You need to communicate rather than assume the expectations are the same. And the reason is because we grow. You grow, they grow, everyone grows. They make room for change. When you grow, you have to make room for change. If you can survive an uncomfortable conversation, then change can begin to take place. I think these relationships are incredibly precious because they teach us something about ourselves, but also about what it is to be in a relationship with someone else or a friendship with someone else. It teaches you about your boundaries, about expectation, how well do you communicate. It asks you to be more aware of where and how are you changing. Sometimes, so what matters is the history that you've changed, and the relationship cannot take a new shape. That can be painful, especially when there's still love, but either one of you or neither one of you wants to change anything. I think when it reaches this point, we need to acknowledge it. We need to acknowledge that, yes, we love that relationship, but neither of us can fit in it. You can still agree to disagree and part amicably. There is no need to see it as failure. Sometimes people grow away from each other. You may still have the love and the history, but you have become completely different people. Sometimes you are not grieving a person either, or the loss. You are grieving a version of the relationship that you have lost. You are grieving a time in your life, a shared identity, a way of existing and living that can no longer continue. Sometimes we think, if I still love them, then why should I feel wrong? Why doesn't this feel right? And this is why I often come back to a question, who are you becoming? Because we forget that we are constantly changing. We interact with life. We affect life. We give it meaning, but also life affects us and changes the meaning and the values that we are looking for. Real growth, to me, is not about creating a better version or a superior version or a more enlightened version. It is about becoming more honest and accountable, more aware, about giving yourself the space to reflect and observe, because you are the one who is navigating your life. You have the master here within you. No one else is responsible for the choices that you make. Because when you change because of that relationship, every other relationship in your life changes because of the level of awareness that you have reached. The way you respond changes, what you tolerate changes, what you desire changes, even what you want from your time together changes. And perhaps the people who truly belong in the next chapter of your life are the people who recognize this. They don't necessarily need to agree with you, but they are the people who can remain in the relationship with you while allowing you to evolve. And equally, you must also allow them to evolve, spread their wings, do what they need to do, because this works both ways. It's not only how you expect to be treated, they also expect to be treated according to what their desires and what they need. So you cannot ask someone to stay exactly as they are. while you change, or the opposite. People who love you are changing too. Their priorities may change, their needs may change, their dreams may change, their capacity to change may change. And sometimes the most loving thing to do is to meet each other again at this new level of awareness, rather than to meet each other at the same level of whom we used to be. So if you're going through a period of growth and some of your relationships feel different, I would say don't rush into labeling them. I receive so many clients who come with their own self-diagnosis. You will only be putting yourself in a box, which means it will become so difficult to come out of that box. The roles you play may change. What you see may change because now you're seeing a new person, new patterns. So what are you asking from others? And finally, what are you asking of yourself? Most importantly, your actions need to be aligned with who you are becoming. Not out of your ego that they should treat me this way or they should be that way because I am now that way. Whatever happens in a relationship, I believe the real work is to remain honest without becoming hard, compassionate without abandoning yourself, open to change without turning every change into a rejection. Don't take this personally. I had someone tell me once, you have to acknowledge how I feel. I said, no, you have to acknowledge your feelings. I'm not responsible for the way you feel. I hope this made sense to you. I'm Sahar Huneidi Palmer, intuitive life mentor. And if this conversation resonated with you, I'd love to know in the comments, has your personal growth changed your relationships? If so, what did it teach you about yourself? Thank you for being with me today, and I'll see you next Monday.